Today we're going to discuss the role of communities in prevention of radicalization. It is very often said that people who are vulnerable or living in vulnerable communities should be helped, but that is just a general remark, and it's quite difficult to really give a good form to that, to really organize that. And that's why today we invited two speakers, one from the UK and one from Germany, to let them tell about their specific experiences when it comes to engaging communities, and also the difficulties how to win trust, and perhaps more important, how not to lose trust when working with communities. Later on we will hear Diana Schubert from Augsburg, Bavaria, Germany, but now first we will listen to William Baudet, who is working on CVE since 2008 and now is working in the city of Leicester. The floor is yours, William.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you. So for my presentation, what I wanted to focus on was some of the challenges that we face working with communities in countering violent extremism, but also some of the challenges they face and how we can best address them. So I've focused on three particular areas. The first one is about building trust with those communities. The second one is how we can support them in the work that they want to do. And the third one is how we maintain confidence of those communities as well. Now, it won't come as any surprise to see those three words up there: trust, support, confidence. I think we hear it a lot, but I want to maybe go beyond the words into some of the detail. So in terms of trust, and I apologize if this appears to be death by PowerPoint, but it will come as no surprise to hear that countering violent extremism is not often the first thing that communities will be thinking of when they're considering their own communities, safeguarding their communities, and some of the issues that they need to address. So if we engage communities only through the prism of countering violent extremism, and we ignore the other issues, or if we engage on the other issues through the initial door of countering violent extremism, it sends out a very confused message. To give you a UK example, when the threat from Al-Qaeda first reached us in London in 2005, it came to the realization of the police that actually there had been very little engagement with, for example, our Muslim communities for about 30 years. So the first engagement these communities really had over and above normal reporting of a crime or a burglary was through counterterrorism. The message that sends out is very dangerous. Almost that we didn't care about you till now, and we only now care about you because we think you're a problem. Now, whether that was intended or not, that is the message some communities received. And even now, some 8 years into our own strategy, although we have evolved the strategy greatly since then, that feeling is still there in some communities. I don't think that's why or the message we intended to give, because I was in Prevent in those early days, but for some people that's how they took it. The next problem we had is that in realizing we shouldn't have maybe engaged first with just CVE as the issue, we then used those same CVE officers to say, oh, okay, so let's talk about the other issues you've got problems with. So now the engagement, albeit again well-intentioned, is through the starting point of countering violent extremism and through those same officers. So there are two problems here. Firstly, that countering violent extremism or prevention officers are now tackling other social issues that are not connected. So their job is blurring the margins. But also the communities are saying the only people that want to speak to us are the people that deal with terrorism. So as a local government, as a municipality, we need to have a united and unified approach. So all of us working collaboratively on our own areas of business but to the betterment and for the support of the community. That's when the communities will start to feel they can trust us, because we're taking their other issues seriously and not just through the lens of counter-terrorism. When we are talking about counter-terrorism with communities, we must be very honest in our conversations, in our dialogue. And I say this because quite often the message has been to communities, there is a problem, you need to help us solve it. And when they ask what specifically is the problem, and obviously they see what's on the television, they see what's on the news, they see what's on social media. When they want the detail, we can't just say, we can't tell you, you have to trust us. Because trust needs to be built. Trust needs to be earned. So we need to have an honest dialogue. Obviously, we can't go giving away details of live investigations, but we can be quite specific. So for where I work, for example, I developed the strategy. The strategy has been agreed and signed off by my oversight board, and I published the strategy online. And in that document, I list where the problems are. I list what areas of the city the problems are greater. And I list what exactly we are facing locally as our overarching threat. And because the document is online, I can tell people, if you're ever unclear about what we're doing or why we're doing it, you can go and read the document yourself. It's quite boring. They probably want to just listen to me, but it's there nonetheless, and they can explore it for themselves. It also gives them a chance to critique what I've written. So they can come back to me and say, well, we understand why you've done this, but can you please explain why you think that is the solution? Because we're not clear on that. But because the document is there for them to see, they can respond, they can reply, and we can have an open and honest discussion about the risks, the threats, and what we want to do to solve them. The other important factor, and interestingly, I came across this exact issue this morning, is that we need to be balanced in our approach. So yes, we need to base our solutions on where the risks and threats lie, but we cannot ignore the other issues that are out there. And what I mean by that is that quite often the focus is only on the ISIS, Daesh, or Al-Qaeda risk and threat. But actually, from the perspective of the Muslim communities, we find it very difficult to see any connection really between themselves and their faith and what's happening with these groups in Syria and Iraq. To then only focus on that and not look at the problems that are, say, coming from the far right, which for Muslim communities is definitely a greater risk to them, creates a disparity and an inequality that will destroy trust. Now, obviously, if you live in an area where the only threat is around ISIS or Daesh, then you need to have that honest and open dialogue, which is why that point is on there as well. But from a social cohesion point of view, not CVE, communities will still worry about the threat from the far right. So I think any training packages, any initiatives, particularly those we deliver within a community setting and within schools, need to look at both sides of that CVE equation, the far right and the Islamist, and deal with them in equal proportions. So for me, that's about setting the groundwork for building the trust. In terms of support, this is quite an interesting one. And the approach I've taken here is to look at how we can support communities who want to be involved in our solutions. Very often, and certainly historically, we've been very keen to just give money to communities and say, here's a pot of money, and with this money, we want you to do great work in CVE. Sometimes the money has been squandered. Sometimes the money has not gone on CVE. And sometimes we're giving money to organizations who have a real passion for being part of the solution, but have never really had the skills to do what is needed. We're just giving them money. So what we're looking at now in the UK is, instead of giving communities money, can we give them the practical skills that they need to help us solve the problem? And it's the old adage of, do we give a man a fish and feed him once, or do we teach him to fish so he can feed himself forever? That's the approach we're looking at now. So very often, some of the simplest solutions are to amplify the voices of community organisations or individuals who need to be heard, to put out a positive social narrative about being a Muslim growing up in that particular country or municipality. And sometimes it's counter-narrative as well, where we need to challenge some of the abuses of religion that are taking place. And the quickest and simplest way of doing that is to teach communities, teach individuals, teach activists how to use social media, but to use it properly, to gain a following, to keep a following, to use that following to the best extent, to make sure that the people that are following them on social media put out the messages themselves too, and create this exponential delivery of social narrative and counter narrative. But there is a caveat to that. When you either give a community the money, or as we would prefer, to give them the skills to do the job themselves, they must retain their independence. It's absolutely critical, because their credibility will go if at any point they are seen to be the spokespeople, the stooges, the mouthpieces of local government or national government. They must retain their status as a critical friend. Yes, thank you for the skills. We will use these skills to challenge the terrorist narrative, but actually we need to be independent. If we see that the municipality is not doing what it should be doing over here, or even in CVE, we must be given the opportunity and be allowed, despite the funding and the support we've got, to challenge you as well, because otherwise we lose our independence. And if we lose that, we lose our credibility. The other issue around support that is absolutely critical, and we saw it here very, very recently in the UK, that some of those groups that we have, whose voices we have amplified, have come under attack in the national mainstream printed media, which was really devastating, but also by some other activist groups who have their own reasons for wanting to perhaps stop CVE work in its tracks. So we must also entertain and plan for what we will do in case of that eventuality. Because, again, to retain the trust we've built initially, the support must be strong. And that support includes helping those communities that might come under attack when they're trying to help us in countering violent extremism. Which leads me on to the last main point, which is around confidence. And this one is around community engagement. I hear the term every single day in every European country I visit or work in, including my own. But I'm not quite sure if some of the people, particularly more senior people, really understand what that means. So I asked somebody recently who worked for a local government in the UK, what time do you go home? And they said to me, 5 o'clock most days, 4 o'clock on a Friday, because I like to be home. I said, what time does your phone go off? And people can reach you when I leave work, 5 o'clock or 4 o'clock. So to give an example, last night was Sunday night at 10:30. I received a phone call from a community member needing some help on a certain issue connected to CVE. I'm approachable, I'm available, and I'm constantly visible to the community. For me, engagement is not about rubbing shoulders with established community leaders. It's about people at the grassroots, knowing who CVE staff and coordinators are, being able to contact them at hours to suit them, because very often our community members work 9 to 5 as well. Their free time for CVE is when we're clocking off and going home. So they need to be able to reach us then. So I think you need to manage expectations. It was very unusual to get a phone call at 10:30 on a Sunday night. It doesn't happen every week. And obviously sometimes that has an impact on your own family. So you need to manage those expectations. But at the same time, you need to be available beyond normal business working hours. We need to involve communities also to build their confidence around the other issues that affect them. So bringing together a community reference group that tackles a whole range of social problems, community problems, all those issues that communities desperately care about over and above CVE is really, really important. Maybe meet every couple of months, establish community members and leaders around the table, talking about the issues that care about them. And one of the topics might be CVE, and it probably should be. But then beyond that, I think it's also really important to have a specific CVE reference group as well, based on the community. And for here, we want really to include all faiths and no faith, because these are issues that affect everybody. And this is a group whose purpose is not to bid for money. And I think you need to put that expectation to one side straight away, because many will want to be involved thinking there's money at the end of this. But it's about challenging the work that we're doing on CVE, making sure communities are invested in the work that we want to do. So looking at our action plan, looking at our strategy, our policies, and having the opportunity to have an open discussion and debate and question them. And it's also a good opportunity to use those meetings to maybe bring people in and experts in from central government, from academia, from organisations like the RAN, to talk about some of the bigger issues around the world and in our own countries that are developing around CVE. The other important factor here around maintaining that confidence is not just being available in outside of business hours, but having a really quick communication method. Email is very often not the solution. Some people don't check emails. Some people who don't work in an office don't open up Outlook first thing when they arrive. They're reliant on their mobile phones. Very often it's messaging apps that are the quickest route to communicate. So WhatsApp, Telegram, Kik, all of these are very popular messaging apps. I would suggest people working in CV, if they don't already have this, look to establish communication networks, distribution groups, broadcast groups on those platforms. So you have a very quick way of sending out a lot of information, a bit of information to a lot of people. Quite often you can use that to put people's minds at rest if there's a problem locally, but also if there are any myths going around about what CVE strategies are doing. We've had a few quite choice examples here in the UK that were total nonsense, but it was only through WhatsApp that we were able to get the alternative truth narrative out there into communities. So that's trust, that's support, and that's confidence. There are some areas to avoid though, some warning zones. And the first one is the one that anyone that knows me will know I always talk about, is the self-appointed community leaders. Every town has them, every community has them. And if someone comes forward and says, I am the leader for this community, straight away I'm a little bit wary. Very often they are not the gateway into your community, they're gatekeepers. And they determine what information gets passed back and forth, and that's no good. You need people who genuinely open the doors into the communities. Most often, it's the people who are quite shy about being called community leaders. You do need to engage with every relevant group that you need to on this topic, but you also need to be very wary of the community politics and community rivalries. Some groups will say, well, I won't work with you if you engage with them over here, but we must be objective. We need to engage with everybody because the issues are facing everybody. And if a group won't engage with us because of that, that's a shame. But perhaps we just have to accept that and maybe try as hard as we can to establish that relationship further down the line. But we must be objective and inclusive, include all groups, no matter what rivalries they have themselves. Most importantly with community engagement, it's frustrating for me that some senior managers still don't see this. I think perhaps they don't understand community engagement, is that we must be realistic in what we expect. Sometimes it can take months, if not years, to build a trusted relationship with a community organisation or even an individual. And we must invest that time ourselves. I've been in Leicester now for nearly 4 years. And in that time, I have built some trusted relationships, some of whom even 2 years ago might not have invited me round or opened the door. But because I've been invested the time, and because I've been here consistently for those 4 years and visible and available and approachable, now some of those doors are opening. So if you have a very quick turnaround,
Well, thank you very much, William, for this introduction. I have some questions for you. By the way, if you have any questions for William, please write them down in the chat box. But I had some point on the critical friends you mentioned. Sometimes people are quite critical also about values which are most probably represented by local government. And is there any frontier? Is there any way where you say, well, now you're getting too critical to be involved in our program, or is it just being patient with them?
I think that depends. So we have this notion of kind of fundamental values in the UK. So if someone is critical of those values, which are tolerance and respect, then I think we need to be very strong and push back and say that, well, no, these are our values, these are the values of our country, and we must stand by those. If someone is critical of a municipality policy, then I think we have to take that on the chin. I think if they go too far and they're rude or abusive in that, then that's a different story. But we can't give out support and money with the expectation that the people we're giving that
Okay, thank you. Then I have one other question. I think we saw this in Holland, but also in a lot of other countries.
I think you'd have to
after the Charlie Hebdo attacks, a lot of people from local governments went to the local communities and saying, well, here we are because there's something going on with Islam. And then a lot of Muslim communities said, well, it's nice you come to us, but we don't have anything to do with what happened in Paris, and we don't feel vulnerable at all. So why are you coming here? Why didn't you come before? Did you have similar experiences, and how did you deal with that?
Okay, so specifically to Charlie Hebdo, no. So those conversations we had in the very early days, the only solution to that is to keep going back and keep engaging on a range of other issues. When it came to Charlie Hebdo, the issues we had were more complex, and we found some quite divided views, and some people who completely condemned the actions of the terrorists, some who were a little bit sympathetic, and others who came out with some views that were really quite concerning based on their own deeply held beliefs. So the Charlie Hebdo attacks in particular were very, very challenging for us. Specifically on the question of the communities pushing back and saying, well, you didn't come to talk to us about anything else before, so why should we talk to you now?
Okay, thank you. Final question for now, and then we go to the next speaker. Is you thought that your strategy is online. Could you please write down in the chat box later on the website to that, so that our participants can see where your strategy is, so that we're also transparent to them?
And just continue to engage on the issues that matter to them as well.
Okay.
And over time, those barriers will break down.
Okay. Okay, well, super. Well, then we now go on to our next speaker, and we go to the
no problem.
Bavarian city
It's
of
literally
Augsburg,
about to be
where
rewritten.
Diana Schubert is
Not this
working.
week, but
She
next
works
week
for
I
the
should be
city of
finalising the
Augsburg
new
since
stuff. So the old one
1991,
is still up there.
and since
Everyone's welcome to look at it.
2006, she's the chief executive officer of the local crime prevention council. And in this capacity, she's also working on religiously motivated radicalism since 2011. And she's also involved into the EFIS project, also on local institutions against extremism. The LIAIS project is that. So let's go to you, Diana, and we're very curious about your experiences in Augsburg and beyond that. There you go.
Thank you very much, Martin. So I'll start with a short description of my city. Augsburg is located in the south of Germany in the state of Bavaria, and it's really close to Munich. We got around 290,000 inhabitants right now, but the population is constantly growing, and we estimate to hit the 300,000 in 2019. Augsburg is the third biggest city in Bavaria. Head of our municipality is our mayor, Dr. Grieve, and the administration of the city of Augsburg is divided into 7 departments, each of them led by a deputy mayor. Crime prevention and the Office for the Crime Prevention Council is affiliated at the Department of Public Order, Health and Sports. And in Augsburg, the coordination for countering religious justified extremism is with the Office for Crime Prevention. So that's why I shortly get into the structure of our Crime Prevention Council. Head of our Crime Prevention Council is the mayor, and the members of the steering group are several deputy mayors, the president of our police, the chief public prosecutor, and 2 chief judges, as well as 2 scientists of our university. We tackle a lot of different phenomena in our working groups, so as addiction, graffiti, domestic violence, crime prevention through environmental design, sports and security, and some more. Our crime prevention is quite young. It exists since 2007, and until now we built up a big network. Since we're talking about working with communities, some words about our structure of population in Augsburg. 141 different nations live in Augsburg, and around 58,000 of our citizens are people with foreign nationality, and around 70,000 people with German nationality got a migration background. So that makes 44.3% of our citizens have a migrant background, and in the age group under 18, it's even more than 61%. That shows that we live in a very diverse society in Augsburg, which is definitely nice, but also brings some challenges with it. So, but how do we work with the communities precisely in prevention of radicalization? I will start with the non-CVE related measures, and for that I have to take you back in history a bit. In 1650, so it's quite a bit back, a legislation was determined to ensure a permanent peaceful coexistence of Catholic and Protestant Christians. That legislation was signed in Augsburg on the 8th of August 1650. The Protestants in Augsburg were the first to commemorate this day in order to celebrate their equality with the Roman Catholic Church. And since 1950, the 8th of August is an official holiday in Augsburg. That's why Augsburg is the so-called City of Peace, and we take this very serious. So, and that's why we have an office for the City of Peace, which organizes together with a lot of stakeholders many events with interreligious character. Actually, this Thursday, July 14th, the program around the yearly High Festival of Peace is starting. Since many years, the festival has been an interreligious and intercultural celebration, and this year's key aspect is courage. Here you can have a peek into the various programs. What you can see are just 3 of more than 60 events within the festival. And there are so many of the communities integrated in the organization, and all the events, they play a very active role and work really close together with us. The festival ends with the Table of Peace, which is a very strong symbol of a peaceful living together. There are a lot of tables and benches are being brought to the town hall square, and everybody can come and sit there. All the guests bring something self-made to eat and share it with the people sitting next to them, whether they know each other or not. And our Office for Peace is not only responsible for the festival. There is, for example, the Roundtable of Religions, which was initiated by the city of Augsburg and is being organized not just by the city anymore, but also by the participating communities. The topmost ambitions or goals of the Roundtable are to contribute to a peaceful living together in Augsburg, to mitigate conflicts where religion is assumed a role, and to establish an understanding for exercising different religions within the public. There are also yearly series of lectures about diversity and a peaceful society, and other events like the Festival of Cultures and the Diversity Day. For working with the communities, I think honest interest in real participation of the communities is a precondition. Augsburg institutionalized the participation of citizens with a migrant background. For that, an Integration Advisory Council is installed. This council advises the council of the city in question of migration, diversity, and integration. The position of our Integration Advisory Council is that integration is not a unilateral process. Mutual tolerance and acceptance is a requirement. Nobody has to deny his origin. Everybody accepts the particularly religious and cultural background. All of us have the same rights, responsibilities, and an equal access to resources. Our Office for Migration, Diversity, and Intercultural Aspects offers, in cooperation with the different religious institutions, visits to different communities, so as different Muslim communities and mosques, Christian communities and churches, the synagogue, Buddhistic institutions, and a lot more. So we get to know each other a bit better. Of course, all of this is not mainly about Salafism or radicalization, but all the actors are aware of the problem and are working in minimizing discrimination and other risk factors which can lead to radicalization in any way. And for me, it seems to be very important that we do not, and William just mentioned that too, that we do not only get in touch with the communities when there's a problem. We want to live peaceful together, and for that we need to build trust and take each other's needs serious. And the good thing is that there is already a basis where we can talk clearly and very transparent and open about radicalization and new Salafism. Our experience is that the communities want to discuss radicalization and they want to work together with us. One of our best practice projects for working with youngsters is HEROES. HEROES is a program for gender equality and against suppression in the name of honor. Target audience are young men in the age between 14 and 18 with a migrant background, especially from countries supporting patriarchal behavior. In weekly sessions, patriarchal paradigms are discussed as well as values of German society. The young men reflect their own positions on topics like honor, manhood, and gender equality, and also religious justified radicalization. After 1 year training, the HEROES give workshops in schools to share their experiences in a peer-to-peer approach. The HEROES know about cultural aspects, about conflicts and constraints, and about dreams of the peers, because this is what they also dream about. So they face the students on equal footing. Here we also want to prevent intolerance and discrimination. There's another project I want to introduce to you. It's called MUSA. For Muslims, there is still no regulatory structures for theological religious support in Germany like for Christians. The project Musa, Muslim Counseling Augsburg, supports people who are being in emotional crisis like in hospitals, elderly homes, or prisons. Musa is run by the Institute for Transcultural Understanding and works with voluntary services. Communication is in mother tongue. The staff know cultural specific characteristics and possesses an essential religious understanding. Since personal crises sometimes lead to radicalization, Musa is an important piece of our puzzle in countering extremism. How is Augsburg affected by radicalization? In 2010, we got hints that there were 2 students who traveled to Afghanistan and took part in a training camp. We also knew that there is one mosque in Augsburg which was still and still is being watched by the Department for Protection of the Constitution. The problem we got now is that this is the only Arabic-speaking mosque in Augsburg, so a lot of refugees go there and live their religion. Luckily, so far, we only have a very few people, about 5 we know about, who went to Syria until now. When we got aware of these facts, we started to build up our network for the prevention of radicalization and Salafism. First, we started with a pilot in just one city quarter. That was in 2012. We called the project Connected in Oberhausen. Oberhausen is a quarter of Augsburg. The problems we defined were that local stakeholders have a lack of information about specific behavior of the youth milieu, and therefore are mostly not able to distinguish between typical youth behavior and radicalization. And also that networking of the stakeholders is lacking, and therefore the case-specific handling is not sufficient. In cooperation with the Bavarian Ministry of Social Affairs, we set up 4 educational measures. Our goals of the meetings were to sensibilize the stakeholders and to enlarge our cooperation with the Muslim and migrant communities and to build up networks on a small scale. At the moment, we're trying to implement these networks on a small scale all over the city. Being partner in the LIES, Martin just mentioned, Local Institutions Against Extremism project of the European Forum for Urban Security, we enhanced our approach by getting a lot of information how other European cities are trying to handle radicalization. Like other cities, we also think that a multi-agency approach is crucial here. We have many relevant stakeholders already on board in our citywide network for the prevention of Salafism. For example, our Office for Migration, Diversity and Intercultural Aspects, our Office for a City of Peace, the local police, youth work, schools, and as you can see, many more. And if there is somebody suspected to be radical, parents, family, teachers, youth workers, friends and other people in the social environment can contact and get in touch with the Violence Prevention Network. The Violence Prevention Network is an NGO assigned by the Bavarian Ministry of the Interior. VPN will work with this person and the family and friends. VPN is also responsible for working with people coming back from Syria. In Augsburg, we set up our network around this NGO and try to work as close together as possible. As mentioned, VPN is responsible for the whole state of Bavaria, so not just Augsburg. For them, it's really important to have a coordinator within the municipality who can open doors for them to institutions, different departments of the municipality, and also to communities and families. Like Will mentioned before, you can reach VPN any time of the day and also on weekends, and they get in touch with the people right away. Now, getting to the end of my presentation, and to sum up, for working with communities in CVE, we think it is crucial to have a foundation built on trust, same as William said. A trustful basis takes its time and can't grow if you only work together when there are problems. And besides trust, also courage, in German Mut, what you can see on the picture right there. is needed to get in contact with communities because we face a different culture and we might be afraid to get rejected. That never happened to me until now, or my colleagues. There was always an open door. And if we trust and respect each other, we can also solve problems like radicalization. So much from me. Thank you for listening, and I got 1 minute over. I hope that's okay. Hello?
So no, that's no problem. I just had a technical hiccup, but that's working again fine. I have some questions for you, Diana, because what you told really rose a lot of questions in both the chat boxes. And first of all was the question of Etienne, who asked you, do you cooperate with the police and domestic intelligence, and how do you, in that sense, how do you keep the balance between having trust with communities and also having contact with law enforcement groups?
Oh yeah, that's a special challenge for VPN, for the Violence Prevention Network, the people who work directly with radicalized or people. And yeah, that is a challenge, but they have this written agreement that well, they get cases from the police, from the Ministry of Interior, and then they well, they have data already, but they also work with the communities, and it's if there is no security problem, there will no be data given to the police.
Okay,
so they
thanks.
just make this transparent, and yeah, well, in the end you have to trust. It's not always easy.
Yeah. No, and if I can elaborate a bit on that further, if you coming in, for example, coming from the Crime Prevention Council, or if you're doing one of these projects, are people often saying to you, you're just being nice to us because you want to have information you can give further to this security services? Because that's the thing we very often hear. If you reach out for the first time to groups, that people are a bit concerned about what you're going to do with their information.
Yeah, but since we have all these events and all these connections already with the communities, so I get in with my colleagues from the City of Peace, for example, or our Office for Migration. So there is always a door opener, and of course sometimes they ask me, are you from the police? Yeah, and I'm not, I'm a civil servant. That makes it more easy, I'd say.
Yes, okay. There was also a question to you, and I think I will also use this question also to involve William later, because I think the question will go for the both of you. Is that two people asked, it was Kai who asked, to what extent do you work also with secular community groups, a non-religious one? And Anna Ruiz had a similar question in what would be the advantages to work with mostly religious groups or mostly non-religious community groups? So could you elaborate on that, Diana? And then after that I will also ask William the same question.
Well, I think with us it's equal. We work also with religious groups, but also with the migrant communities. And well, we don't make a big difference out of it. We get in touch with the ones who is important to us at the moment for the topic we want to discuss. And the good thing is that they come up to us, so and ask for support or something, also on CVE, and I think this is really positive sign.
Okay.
Was that the answer,
William? I think you gave an answer. Yes. You have anything to add from your side, William?
Yes, very similar, really. So, in terms of who we invite to sit around our community scrutiny panel, that's across all groups, religious or secular. In terms of the work that we want to support, that will be based on which groups have access to the communities where the risks need to be addressed. So if a secular organisation has a better reach than a particular faith organisation, then we would go with the secular organisation. But a lot of it is driven by the threat. So when we're looking at the far right threat, very often it's a secular organisation or a secular community outreach organisation. But also sometimes we'll bring in a faith organisation who can work in areas of far right extremism to dispel some of the myths around Islam and around faith. So yeah, it very much depends on who's the best fit for the work that needs to be done.
Okay, thank you. William, I had two questions for you which I think are probably in line with each other, so I posed them in the same time. The first one is, what activities are you actually doing? Could you give some practical examples? And the other one is, do you have some good practices? And I presume that what you're doing should be good practices, isn't it? So perhaps you could elaborate on that a little bit.
Okay, so since I've been here in Leicester, we've run nearly 20 projects or initiatives, but there are some that I'm really proud of. So I'm going to very quickly tell you about three. The one I'm most proud of was around reaching the alimas in the Muslim community. So they were seen as the hard to reach of the hard to reach communities. And we managed to employ the skills of an outreach organization who had tackled issues on forced marriage, honor violence, female genital mutilation, and they were able to reach into the sort of female Muslim community and then go further and reach the female scholars. And this was giving them the skills to talk about CVE, particularly online issues, in their own private study circles each week. So that was one I was most proud of. And we reached about 150 Muslim women with that. The two that are the most challenging, but also the most rewarding, one is called Pathways, and it's about building community safeguarding hubs. So the low-level issues that can create vulnerabilities to radicalization can be picked up by community organizations. So we might set one up in a mosque, train the volunteers in the mosque to understand issues around radicalization, but also the other social fractures that can lead people that way. And then the communities who might not want to ring the police, might not want to ring the municipality, and might not know where else to go, can go to their local mosque or community centre and raise those concerns there. So a lot of the cases are around substance misuse, drug and alcohol. But within that, we are able to identify individuals who are vulnerable to radicalisation. And it's very much a community-based safeguarding response. Very time-consuming, not massively expensive, but does rely on the will and the time of the volunteers. The other one is called Upstanding Neighbourhoods, which has been involved in local, national and even international counter-narrative campaigns. So using cohorts and networks of community activists which grow and evolve of their own accord, we're able to create videos, movie clips, hold community question time events, and push out using social media really strong positive social narratives to counteract the narratives of groups like Daesh and also the far right. So the positive social narrative about the benefits of being a Muslim living in the UK directly challenges ISIS, who say that you cannot be British and Muslim, but at the same time overturns the stereotypes that the far right have about Muslims and Muslim communities. And so really powerful. That is quite expensive, however, that one, and needs an awful lot of time management as well of my own. But both of them are strong because they are community-based initiatives being funded as opposed to kind of top-down initiatives designed by municipalities or so-called experts.
Okay, thank you. I got a question in for Diana, which is from Elena, and she asked, actually, could you give some more details on the Musa project? Perhaps it's also a good idea to, if you have any further information, to put it in the chat box further. But she was especially looking for what kind of target group do you have, and what kind of experts do you involve in the Musa project?
Yeah, the Musa project is the one where the volunteers, sorry for my English, volunteers give support to people in who got a personal crisis. We already have that in a Christian context, but well, we support people here, especially in hospitals, or not we. It's run by the Institute for Transcultural Understanding. I can post the homepage, but I'm sorry, it's only in German. But well, I can try to translate most of it. And yeah, well, we try to get people when they're vulnerable and get them empowered to go on in which way ever is needed. The important thing is that it's people coming from the same culture with the same background, and of course the support in mother tongue seems to be very important. Yeah, it's successful. I'm not into data from them, sorry, but I know now that they get money from for the project because it is successful from the Bavarian Ministry for Social Affairs as well. So, yeah, well, so for details, I put the homepage.
Yes, if you put a homepage on, it will be well, and Google Translate is solving a lot of language questions meanwhile, so perhaps people will be able to read it. I had another question which comes from Margaret Helle Thompson. She asks, to what extent is it the municipality that has to reach out to the communities, and to what extent do communities at this moment actually reach out to you? Or in other words, is there a demand for talking to municipalities by these communities?
Well, we get all these structures. Is it to me?
Well, then first to you. Yes, ladies first. There you go.
Sorry, Will. I think it's equal, and you cannot say it's this percent and that percent. We just have this good basis with all the events we do together, that it's just normal to get in touch with each other and not say, yeah, now we got to get equal because from the municipality getting in touch with that or this community. It's just we live together and we talk together. So, yeah. So
it's reciprocal. William, you have anything to add there?
Yeah, I think for me it's slightly different because you know, my issue is around CVE. I think sometimes communities are very reluctant to willingly volunteer to come forward to talk about it. So it's usually driven by me going out to them and encouraging their support and their approach. When they contact me, it's because there's an immediate problem that they're concerned about. So I think on this particular topic for me in the UK, it's more driven by me. And we mustn't forget that for a lot of communities who see, particularly Muslim communities, who see what's happening overseas, they have no connection with these people that are out there, and so wouldn't automatically feel that they would need to come forward to us in very much the same way. You know, we weren't having people from our white communities coming forward because Anders Breivik went on a rampage in Norway. We went to them to talk about the issues that then presented, and it's very similar, I think, for faith communities.
Okay, well, thank you. Then I have one more question from Damir, and he asks also you both. So, and now we start with William to do some equal rights things. The question he asks is, how do alt community Muslim groups accept the new migrants we are seeing now recently?
Okay, that's really interesting because I've actually Leicester is built upon its migrant communities. That's why its faith structures are so strong. But what is quite interesting, I have had conversations with some of those traditional migrant communities who are complaining about the Eastern European migrants that are now coming into the UK. And sometimes you have to remind them that they were migrants once themselves too. In terms of the migrants we're getting from Syria, we are taking refugees in from Syria. The migrant communities are quite supportive, we're finding here. and quite keen to help. The hostility or the anxiety has come from what you might call indigenous communities, who have been sort of spun fear through the media about what that might represent. We even had one national newspaper comparing Muslim migrants to rats and vermin, which had a really disastrous and devastating impact on broader communities as well, and that didn't help. So for our older migrant communities, I'm not seeing any issues really here in the UK, but we are from some of our more far-right communities.
Thank you, William. And how would you see this in Germany, or more specifically in Augsburg, Diana?
So what was the exact question again?
The question is, how do the old community Muslim groups accept the new migrants you're getting now? Is there any tension, or is there support, or?
Oh, sometimes there is some tension, but also big support. I would not say it's the old migrant communities. I'd say it's. I wouldn't. There's just some who have how do you say Vorurteile? What? Maybe you can help me out with the word.
Yes, prejudice. Yes, yeah.
Prejudice. Yes, exactly. But there's also a lot of support. We got so many refugees. I think in October last year we had problems to have beds and for them that they have a roof over their head. And well, there were so many. that was quite. There was a chaos because so many people wanted to help and they didn't. Got with their cars to the halls, to the school sporting halls, because there were just too many bringing clothes and food and drinks and everything, and a lot of people with migrant background. So I couldn't tell if it was migrant communities, but there was a lot of people just supporting the refugees we got, and it's still like this.
Okay, well, thank you, and I think I'm afraid we have to end with this positive note as we are running out of time. It's always when you have a lot of questions, time goes fast. I would like to thank you, William and Diana, for both your introductions. Also, thank you very much for the information you promised to send us, and I saw that meanwhile William already filled the English chat box quite full with links to his projects. So thank you for that. As stated, this webinar is being recorded and will be put on the website of the Deutsche Präventionstag on short notice, so you can recommend it to all your colleagues or see any further. And also the slides of the presentations you saw will be published there, so you can use that further for information you might need. Well, on behalf of the Deutsche Präventionstag and the Radicalisation Awareness Network, I would like to thank you for attending this webinar. Especially thanks to Stiftung Bürgermut Matthias, who was helping us out technically today. The next webinar will be after the summer holidays somewhere. It still has to be planned, and also the subject has to be planned, but you will hear from us on short notice. Thanks again for attending, and we hope to see you next time. We hope you enjoyed this webinar on communities and prevention of radicalization. Bye-bye.
Bye.